My name is Helen, and I'm 48 years old. The day my world started to crack open, I was wearing a tailored navy blue dress and pearl earrings, trying my best to look like everything was under control. I had just left a meeting at the firm where I worked as an executive assistant. My boss, Jonathan, the CEO, walked beside me, his hand brushing mine a little too often. I knew I was playing with fire. At home, my husband Mark was preparing dinner. Roast chicken, his specialty. We'd been married for 21 years. Steady, predictable, too predictable. Our conversations had turned into weather reports. Our love life? A polite silence. That night, I lied. Working late, I texted while I sat across from Jonathan in his penthouse, wine glass trembling in my hand. He leaned forward. "You deserve more than what you've settled for, Helen." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The room went quiet, except for the sound of my breath catching in my throat. That was the night everything changed, but not in the way I imagined. 3 weeks later, I noticed Jonathan growing distant. Fewer messages, cold glances at work, and then the real shock came. Mark found out. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He just looked at me and whispered, "You broke something I don't know how to fix." That sentence hurt more than any slap could. And that was only the beginning. Because when karma comes, it doesn't knock. It breaks the door down. Our home was a modest two-story on a quiet street. Nothing luxurious, but it had warmth, the kind that takes decades to build. The front porch still had the wind chime Mark's mother gave us at our wedding. I hadn't heard it ring in weeks. Mark worked as a high school teacher. Every morning, he packed his lunch, kissed me on the forehead, and said, "Back by 6." He never missed a day. Or a promise. Meanwhile, I walked into a world of glass elevators, marble floors, and expensive suits. Jonathan lived in that world. Unreachable, immaculate. He was the kind of man who didn't ask, he told. Who didn't love, he took. But I let him. There was one person at work who saw through me, Carla, my colleague, and only real friend. She once leaned over during lunch and said quietly, "Be careful, Helen. Men like him, they don't fall. They just watch others do it." I laughed it off, but her words stayed with me. At church, I avoided eye contact. I stopped singing, stopped praying. I couldn't stand the echo of my own guilt in that sacred silence. Still, I wore the mask. I told myself I was just exploring a part of myself I had lost. But deep down, I knew I wasn't exploring, I was escaping. From the routine, from the silence in our bedroom, from the feeling that maybe I had become invisible. But the truth? I was making myself disappear, one choice at a time. It got worse before it got better. After Mark found out, I expected shouting, demands, rage. Instead, he just withdrew. He slept in the guest room, ate alone, went to work in silence. There was a heaviness in the house, like the walls themselves had stopped breathing. I tried to talk. "Mark, please, I need you to say something." He looked at me like I was a stranger. "I said everything when I married you," and walked away. At work, Jonathan barely acknowledged me. The man who once whispered promises into my ear now treated me like an old email. Read, discarded, forgotten. Then came the final blow. The company announced layoffs. Rumors spread like wildfire. And when the list came out, my name was there. I confronted Jonathan after hours, standing in his office doorway. "You're letting me go?" I asked, voice shaking. "It's not personal, Helen. Just restructuring." "After everything?" He didn't flinch. "You knew the rules. You broke them." It wasn't heartbreak I felt. It was humiliation. Carla found me in the parking lot staring at the paper. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I told you, he doesn't fall. Tears welled up. What do I do now? She didn't answer. She just handed me her church's card. Sometimes the way back starts where you stopped believing. I clutched the card like it was the last rope before the fall. I had no job, no respect, no trust at home, and no one to blame but myself. Days turned into weeks. Mark and I barely spoke. We lived like shadows in the same house. I tried to reach him, but he had built walls I couldn't climb. One evening, I found him fixing a broken cabinet door in the kitchen. I leaned against the wall and whispered, "I'm sorry." He didn't look at me. "You're sorry for getting caught or for giving up on us?" I didn't have an answer, only tears. I started going to Carla's church, not for faith at first, but because I didn't know where else to go. I sat in the back pew, alone, afraid someone would recognize the weight I carried. The pastor spoke of grace, of broken things becoming whole. One Sunday, he quoted from the book of Hosea, "I will heal their waywardness and love them freely, for my anger has turned away from them." Something broke inside me. I sobbed silently. Not because I felt forgiven, but because I realized I had never really believed I could be. At home, I began cooking dinner again, leaving notes for Mark, small things. No answers came. Until one day, he handed me a letter. Folded, plain, it read, "I prayed last night. For the first time in years, I didn't ask for you to come back to me. I asked for strength to let go, and God answered me in silence. Maybe that silence means He's waiting, like I have." I wept over that letter because it wasn't hope. It was a pause before goodbye. It was a Tuesday morning when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but something, intuition, maybe, pushed me to pick up. "Helen Parker?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Northern Trust Bank. We need to speak with you regarding a joint investment account under your name and Mr. Jonathan Rains." My stomach dropped. I don't have an account with him." The woman paused. "There are multiple withdrawals linked to your social and banking data. You may be a victim of fraud." I could barely breathe. "What kind of withdrawals?" She listed numbers, large ones, funds I never touched. Apparently, during our affair, Jonathan had convinced me to sign a few standard forms. I hadn't read them. I had trusted him. And now, my name was tied to tens of thousands in high-risk losses. The woman's voice softened. "You should contact legal assistance immediately. You may be liable if your signature is confirmed." I hung up, heart racing. Karma hadn't just knocked. It had dragged me into a storm. I lost my job, my dignity, my husband's trust, and now, possibly everything we had built financially. That night, I told Mark the truth. Every detail. He sat across from me, arms crossed, listening in silence. When I finished, I whispered, "Do you still believe in us?" He stared down, then looked at me with eyes full of pain. "I believe in justice, and maybe in grace, but trust? That takes more than words." Then he stood and walked out. For the first time, I truly understood what I had destroyed and what it would cost to even try to rebuild. Winter came hard that year, but slowly, something began to thaw inside me. I kept working, saved every cent, paid off a portion of the debt, refused help even when Carla offered. "I need to do this with my own hands," I told her. One night, while folding laundry, I found Mark's old shirt, the one he wore on our 10th anniversary. I held it to my chest and whispered, I remember who we were. At work, I got promoted to front desk manager. My supervisor said, You're steady under pressure. That's rare. No one had called me steady in years. I started mentoring younger women at church, sharing my story, watching their faces shift from judgment to compassion. One of them hugged me after a meeting. You're the first person who made me feel seen. And just like that, I felt useful again. I even started attending finance workshops. Ironic, I know. I wanted to learn everything I had once ignored: investments, loans, credit, the things that had once destroyed me. Not to get rich, but to never be blind again. One evening, after a church group meeting, Mark was waiting outside. He had 2 coffees in his hand. You still like it with cream and no sugar? I froze, nodded. We sat on a bench in silence, just sipping. Then he said, You've changed. Not just the way you walk, but the way you look at people. I had to lose everything to see clearly. He nodded. Maybe we both did. That was all, but it was the first brick in whatever this new beginning would be. Spring brought light. Mark and I began talking more. Small things at first: groceries, bills, weather. Then one Sunday, he asked if I wanted to ride with him to church. I said yes. We didn't hold hands, but our footsteps were in sync. One day, a letter came from the bank. The final review. My lawyer said if I could gather the last $6,000, I could close the case and clear my name. But I had only saved half. I prayed that night, knees on the cold floor. Lord, I don't ask to be saved, only for a way through. The next morning, Carla called. Her aunt had passed away and left her a small inheritance. She wanted to give me the rest of the money. I refused. You helped me get here, I said. Now I finish it. Instead, I took a second job, cleaning offices at night, scrubbing floors, emptying bins. Every stain I cleaned felt like a step toward redemption. Mark noticed. He left small things in the kitchen: a thermos with tea, a slice of pie, once a note. Pride is a wall. Humility builds bridges. I see your bridge. One evening, as I prepared to send the final payment, I sat on the floor and wept. Not because of the money, but because I had finally earned something no one could take away: my integrity. And just as I clicked send, Mark appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak, just opened his arms, and for the first time in over a year, I let myself be held. A month later, I stood on a stage at our church's women's retreat. The theme was Restored. Carla had insisted I share my story. My knees trembled, but my voice didn't. I betrayed my husband, I said plainly. I lost my job, my savings, and nearly lost myself. But through that loss, I found something I never had before: truth. The room was silent, eyes wide, tears in more than one face. I continued. I used to think faith was for people who had it all together. Now I know it's for people who've fallen apart, people like me. Afterward, women lined up to talk. Some cried. Some hugged me. One whispered, I thought I was alone. But the most unexpected moment came after the crowd thinned. Mark walked up the steps of the stage. He took the mic gently from my hand. I want to say something, he said, voice low but steady. He turned to the audience, then back to me. I never stopped loving her, but I did stop believing we could come back from it. He paused. Until I saw the way she fought, not for me, but for herself, for her soul. He looked at me then and said, Helen, I forgive you. And if you're still willing, I want to start again as 2 new people, wiser, slower, but still together. I couldn't speak. I just fell into his arms. And the crowd stood, applauding, not for a show, but for a miracle. Because that's what it felt like. It's been 2 years since that day. Mark and I renewed our vows in a quiet ceremony, just us and a few close friends. No white dress, no grand music, just truth. We moved to a smaller home, started over, together this time. I now lead a support group at church for women recovering from emotional and financial betrayal. Some caused by others, some self-inflicted. I tell them, redemption isn't a moment, it's 1,000 little choices. Mark went back to teaching full-time. He smiles more, laughs deeper, and sometimes, when we sit on the porch, he holds my hand like he used to in our 20s. Not because everything is perfect, but because we've both seen what happens when you let go of pride and hold on to grace. Jonathan? He disappeared. Rumors say he's under investigation for fraud in multiple companies. But I no longer follow his story. I have my own now, a better one. One rooted in faith, forgiveness, and honest love. And every time I think of that verse, she loved much, therefore she is forgiven much. I remember, love, when rebuilt on truth, is stronger than anything that tried to destroy it. If you're listening to this and carrying shame, don't give up. Karma may hit hard, but grace, when you let it, hits harder.